The Mystery of Gollum's Cave. On August 18, 2005, five friends set out to explore a perilous location known as Gollum's Cave, ominously referred to as the Cave of Death due to its treacherous conditions. They arrived at the entrance at 3 a.m., their flashlights cutting through the darkness. One friend, feeling uneasy, chose to stay outside while the others ventured in. The first challenge emerged almost immediately. A small pool of water blocked the entrance, forcing them to crawl through it to proceed. Deeper inside, the group faced a fork in the path and decided to take the left route, which led to another pool of water. What they didn't realize was that this pool hid an underwater tunnel leading to another section of the cave. The tunnel was claustrophobically small, just 3 to 4 feet wide, and required full submersion to navigate. Only one person could pass through at a time, swimming about 15 feet in near total darkness. Despite the risk, each of the four friends dove into the water one at a time, emerging on the other side into a small air pocket with only 3 feet of headroom above the water. While they regrouped in this cramped space, the friend waiting outside began to worry. The silence and lack of light from inside the cave filled him with dread. Unbeknownst to him, the air in the chamber the group had reached was bad air, a term used by cavers to describe oxygen-deprived environments with high levels of carbon dioxide. This compromised their ability to think, move, and breathe effectively, making the return journey through the underwater tunnel nearly impossible. In their attempt to escape, the first person to enter the tunnel failed to locate the exit and ran out of air. The others followed one by one, each succumbing to the same fate as panic and disorientation overtook them. Outside, the friend finally called for help. Rescue teams arrived and tried to pump fresh oxygen into the cave and drain water from the tunnel. Unfortunately, all efforts were in vain. The bodies of the four friends were later recovered, and the cave was permanently sealed with concrete to prevent further tragedies. I think that only 5% of fast people can like this video and subscribe to this channel before time runs out. Comment done, so I know you did it on time. The fatal dive at Shaft Sinkhole. On May 28, 1973, 9 divers prepared for a descent into Mount Gambier's Shaft Sinkhole, a unique and mesmerizing sight. The entrance to the sinkhole was a narrow opening that led to a vast underwater cavern with a lake 20 feet below. A shaft of sunlight illuminated the cave, providing a natural guide for the divers. Initially, the team agreed to limit their dives to a depth of 200 feet to stay within the illuminated main chamber. However, on the second day, 4 divers decided to push the boundaries. They aimed to reach a depth of 250 feet in the western section of the cave, hoping to set a new record. At the time, divers relied on regular air tanks rather than the safer mixed gas systems used today. Descending to such depths increased the risk of nitrogen narcosis, a condition caused by nitrogen buildup in the bloodstream under high pressure. This effect, similar to intoxication, could impair judgment and motor skills. As they ventured downward, one diver recognized the onset of narcosis and chose to resurface, along with others who felt uneasy. However, 4 divers pressed on, eager to reach their goal. Their movement stirred up layers of silt at the bottom of the cave, creating a thick cloud that reduced visibility to mere inches. Disoriented with their oxygen supplies dwindling and the effects of narcosis worsening, the divers became lost. Rescue attempts were made, but it was too late. The Mossdale Cavern flood. On June 24, 1967, 10 cavers entered Mossdale Cavern, a labyrinth of narrow passages and low ceilings, with the goal of mapping its unexplored sections. The group, led by 2 experienced cavers, was undeterred by the cave's reputation for its tight and treacherous spaces. After hours of crawling through the cave, 4 members decided to exit, overwhelmed by the difficulty of the terrain. They emerged to find the sky overcast but didn't perceive it as a cause for concern. Meanwhile, the remaining 6 continued deeper into the cave, eventually reaching the Far Marathon Passage, a constricted tunnel measuring just 18 inches by 12 inches, with a small stream flowing through it. Unbeknownst to them, rain had begun to fall heavily outside. As the surface group sought shelter, water levels inside the cave started to rise rapidly. The remaining cavers realized the danger and decided to retreat, but they were hours away from the entrance. By the time the surface team noticed the full extent of the flooding, it was too late. A lake had formed around the cave's entrance, cutting off the cavern's only escape route. Desperate, the group inside tried to find higher ground, but the water continued to rise, leaving them with no place to go. Rescue teams worked tirelessly to pump water out and oxygen into the cave, but their efforts were futile. All 6 cavers drowned, their bodies later recovered from the flooded passages. Jacob's Well, a treacherous descent. On November 23, 1983, 2 university students, Richard and Clark, decided to explore Jacob's Well, a seemingly shallow underwater hole that opens into a complex cave system. Known for its beauty and its danger, Jacob's Well had already claimed lives, including 2 divers who became trapped in a narrow passage 2 years earlier. Despite warnings, Richard and Clark were eager to see the cave for themselves. They descended into the first 2 chambers without difficulty, but reaching the 3rd chamber required navigating a tight squeeze. Beyond this, a 4th chamber was accessible only through an extremely narrow passage, a site of past fatalities. To enter the 3rd chamber, both removed their oxygen tanks, holding them in their hands as they squeezed through the small opening. Once inside, Richard became disoriented and dropped his tank. Clark managed to share his air supply, and the 2 began a frantic escape attempt. Their struggle led them into the false chimney, a dead-end passage that resembled an exit. Clark managed to resurface, barely making it to safety, but Richard was not so fortunate. He drowned before reaching the surface. Sterkfontein Cave Incident. On September 29, 1984, cave explorer Nuno Gomes set out to map uncharted areas of South Africa's Sterkfontein Cave. He was joined by 2 friends, Peter Verhel and Malcolm. Their mission was to establish a guideline stretching from the entrance to a section of the submerged cave known as Milner Hall. Nuno was responsible for laying the guideline, while Peter and Malcolm remained outside to assist if needed. Nuno dove into the water and successfully extended the line, covering a distance of 396 feet. Pleased with their progress, the group decided to dive back in to follow the newly placed guideline. Upon reaching the air pocket at the farthest point, they confirmed their success and began the return journey. As Nuno led the group out, Malcolm suddenly signaled to him. Peter was no longer following. Retracing their path, they found Peter had entered a side passage. Nuno motioned for him to return to the main line, and Peter complied. However, on the way out, Peter disappeared again. This time, Nuno and Malcolm assumed Peter had opted for an alternate exit, one that avoided the narrow section they were using. Confident he had surfaced safely, they continued out of the cave. When they reached the surface and realized Peter wasn't there, they waited for his return. Hours passed without any sign of him. Concerned, Nuno and Malcolm re-entered the water to search. They scoured the guideline and nearby tunnels, but there was no trace of Peter. Limited by their air supplies and poor visibility caused by stirred-up silt, they were eventually forced to exit the cave and call for help. Emergency responders, including the fire brigade and police divers, arrived to assist. However, the silt in the water had severely reduced visibility, complicating the search. Efforts were halted for the night, with rescuers fearing the worst. What no one realized was that Peter was still alive. He had become disoriented after entering a secondary tunnel, losing sight of the guideline. With the silt clouding his vision and the complex layout of the cave confusing his sense of direction, he found himself trapped. Peter discovered a small chamber and decided to wait for rescuers there. He attempted to signal by shining his light into the water and banging his tank against rocks, but his efforts went unnoticed. As his flashlight's battery dwindled, he was forced to conserve energy. Exhausted and unsure of the time, he eventually fell asleep. Meanwhile, rescuers suspended their search due to poor conditions and concerns for diver safety. Days turned into weeks, and Peter remained trapped in the cave. By October 6th, a week after his disappearance, police divers resumed their search but still found no trace of him. Another week passed before they attempted again, only to meet the same outcome. Peter had been alive for the first 2 weeks, surviving in darkness and losing significant weight. In desperation, he explored another passage near his chamber, but it led to a dead end. Weak and starving, he returned to his original spot near the water. Despite numerous attempts, rescuers were unable to locate Peter. 6 weeks after his disappearance, the search was officially called off. Volunteers, including Nuno, continued looking for a connection between the dry and wet sections of the cave. It was Nuno who eventually discovered footprints leading to a dead end, where Peter's body was found. Next to him lay a message he had written. "I love you, Churl and Ma." An autopsy revealed that Peter had died of starvation approximately 3 weeks after becoming trapped. Tragically, a diver had once come within 100 feet of his location, but failed to find him due to the cave's challenging conditions. Though Peter's decision to venture off alone may be questioned, his perseverance remains a testament to human endurance in the face of overwhelming odds. Sand Cave Incident. In December 1924, Floyd Collins discovered Sand Cave, a narrow cave near a highway that he hoped to turn into a tourist attraction. Partnering with the landowners, Floyd began excavating the cave to create a more accessible entrance. On January 30th, 1925, Floyd ventured into the cave alone. Beyond the turnaround room, a point where most cavers would stop, Floyd squeezed through a 9-inch-high tunnel. He discovered a deeper chamber, but on his return accidentally dislodged a rock that pinned his left leg. Trapped in complete darkness, he shouted for help until 2 landowners and their son, Jewel Estes, discovered him nearly 24 hours later. Floyd's family and rescuers worked tirelessly to free him, but the unstable cave walls complicated their efforts. Water from melting snow seeped into the passage, creating mud and worsening his condition. Crowds of onlookers gathered outside, and the rescue attempt became a national spectacle as reporters documented every development. Despite numerous attempts, rescuers couldn't free Floyd. The cave entrance eventually collapsed, cutting off access and leaving him without food or water. After 17 days, workers finally reached him, but Floyd had already passed away from exposure.
And I don't think you can click on the next video in 3 seconds.